There we are. Okay. Welcome to the Heartbeat. My friend
Thank
Jessie and
you.
I are here, and we're going to share some space today. And this is the first time we've actually had a conversation sort of face to face. We live relatively close, so this is just the beginning of our connection. So we've been following each other for a while, and it just so happens, and we can talk about how like we connected and all that through our course of our conversation today. But it just so happens that for whatever reason, I was like, let's do this. And you're like, yes.
Oh, I was
So
excited. I was waiting for it to
yeah,
happen.
I'm excited for this conversation. And so for those of you who are not familiar with the Heartbeat, we I like to bring people together to have organic conversations. There's something on my screen. And really give a space, create a space, hold a space for people to share their story, whatever they feel like is coming up. And you and I have had a conversation prior to this podcast recording, and we're just going to go for it. We're going to just have this authentic, organic conversation because that's what we dig and love. So, with that, would you mind introducing yourself and saying a little bit about yourself? And we'll just launch. And it, like I said, it's an awesome opportunity to have a conversation with an amazing human being. So, welcome. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited. My story is kind of a lot, and I really tried to process like, what do I share?
Right.
First off, I'm Jessie Williams, and I'm originally from Arkansas. So if I get really passionate or like really into it and you don't understand what I'm saying, it's totally okay. Just tell me, like, what word are you saying? Because
I
it
love
happens
it.
all the
Yep.
time. Um, so I grew up in extreme poverty. I grew up in abuse, mentally, physically. I was the oldest of 5 kids. I was raised in a cult, and that had so much impact on my life that when from Arkansas, I had moved to Utah, got married to someone in the cult, and it just continued that whole process. More abuse, more. When I was a child, I was raped twice. Like, I have seen a lot of trauma. I have felt a lot of pain. Um, when I finally, and inside during this whole time of like growing, I never felt like I fit. I felt like I was the person that, why am I in this situation? Because now I'm being forced into something that is who I am, because I always questioned everything, and it got me into
Mm-hmm.
trouble. So finally one day, I'm like, you know what? I have 3 beautiful girls, and it just hit me. Why am I allowing this to happen to myself?
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to say no. And I got a divorce. I took 3 months off the grid. Like, I went to nature. I did a whole Julia Roberts thing. Do I like eggs this way? Do I like, what do I like? I questioned
Mm-hmm.
everything everyone ever told me and decided to find, okay, what is true to myself? What do I believe? Like,
Mm-hmm.
everything that I was living was what everyone else believed. And so then I really started feeling, I started having that connection, because I felt like I was living from my brain and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't connected to my heart. And so once I started feeling, that was terrifying, but I
Mm-hmm.
leaned into it. And I'm very much a runner. I love the
Mm-hmm.
outdoors. I love hiking. And so every time I would go out into the mountains, every time I saw a hill, and my mind would be like, oh no, we can't do that. I'm like, oh, we're doing that. So I'd push
Yep.
into it, and I push and I push, and I would just swear all the way up the hill, like, we're doing this. And so leaning into pain, leaning into feeling, all brought me around to who I am now. Because
Mm-hmm.
now I had this beautiful life, remarried. I have 6 more kids added on, so a total of 9. Um, so I feel like there was almost like this rebirth of Jessie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, because when I look back, it's like, wow, who is that woman? It's
Right.
so, so, so different. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a lot of experiences, and I can go as deep as you want to go.
Well, it's really sort of a time for you. So whatever you feel like that comes up in your heart is completely fine to share. And I can just, I do have some curious questions as we go along the way, and if they fit in, I'll certainly ask them. And so I guess my first question is, how old were you? How were you married young? Were
Oh yeah.
you? Yeah.
So when I was the religion I was in, they don't say that they're a cult, but they're totally a cult.
Right.
The way that you live is for women do not have a voice.
Mhm.
Women, they have children. They support their husband. They do all the things at home. That was not my passion inside. So I got married
Right.
at 18. Like
Mhm.
I was being taught at 10 years old, when you get married, this is the person you're going to find, and this is the checklist that you have, and this is who you're going to be
Wow.
with. And it's for eternity. So the person you're with is going to be forever. And there's like a no way out. And so it it was so body shaming. It was being
Mm.
raised like everything like covered up. Nothing was,
Wow.
you just could not just be. You just weren't
Right.
allowed to be. And
Mhm.
that's not human. And so I started realizing this when I was young. I'm like, there's something off. There's something not
Mhm.
right. So I was the oldest. I'm supposed to be like, teaching my siblings, this is the way, be the good example. And here I am like, why? Why are we
Mhm.
believing this? Why do we think that way? We don't ask questions. That's what I was told a
Mhm.
lot. We don't
Mm.
ask questions, and girls don't act that way. Girls
Right.
don't, we don't stir the pot. Well, I found out that is like my core. I stir the pot. Because in my head, stirring the pot is, I can see this growth. I can
Mhm.
see that if I stir the pot, I'm going to bring up everything that's burning. I'm going to take it out and it's going to be better. Like I'm going to find out
Mhm.
what's real, what's rich, what's good. And
Mhm.
so, being married at 18, I mean, you don't know anything at 18.
Right.
You're just beginning.
I was just thinking about like when I was 18, I'm like, oh my good Lord. Like that is just not,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is quite a journey. So I don't want you to have to feel like you have to go into any details like that, but I'm curious about the moment when you had that thought or that reflection or epiphany or whatever you want to call it, like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, why am I allowing this to happen? I think is what you said. Like, what was
Yes.
going on then?
So, I felt like there was a lot of moments that built up to that. So as a child, I remember there was extreme moments like that I just knew there was something off. I
Mhm.
could watch and see what adults were acting like, and I knew right off, I'm like, this isn't normal. This is not how I'm going to be when I grow up. I remember
Mhm.
thinking that very young, but I fought that so much, and I wasn't being accepted and embraced by people who just should love you as you are, that
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I'm just going to give in. So
Mm.
I gave in and I tried to fit into the mold that I never could fit into. Like you just can only
Right.
push a peg so far in, and it's not even going to work if it's not the right size, if it's not where
Right.
it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
So I was going through a lot of abuse in my last marriage, mentally, physically. I had a daughter. I have a daughter who has Rett syndrome, and
Mhm.
she would go 3 nights without sleep. And
Mm.
so I was being drained because in this religion, it's taught you give everything to everyone and love thy neighbor as thyself. But at the same point, you don't love yourself. You don't
Right.
ever put yourself first,
Right.
which has to happen to have healthy boundaries, healthy relationships, to even know who you are. You have to love
Mhm.
yourself first.
Right.
I wasn't doing any of those things. I was
Mhm.
giving from an empty cup, like
Right.
constantly. I felt
Right.
like I had this dream one night that I had a hole in the bottom of my cup. And I kept looking
Mm.
in it and looking in it. And I'm like, it's gone. Like everyone's taking everything. So I had this moment where my ex was being really abusive, and I would drive myself to the ER.
Mm.
And there was things like that had been thrown at me, and my arm, I had come in again for my arm for the same thing, being put in the sling. And I'm sitting there, and the nurse is like, is everything okay at home? I'm like, yeah, why not? Like, it's totally fine. Like, I just fell.
Mm.
Didn't even realize I was lying. Didn't realize it.
Wow. Yeah.
And she had to pull it up and be like, this is the third time you've been in like 2 months. And I'm like, oh. And she goes, and it's the same thing over and over. And I remember driving home going, what am I doing? I have 3 daughters. I want to be this powerful woman that I know is inside, but why am I so terrified to be this woman? And it finally, like a couple weeks later, I had it. I was like, I'm going away for a weekend. And I went with my running friends. And after that, when I came back, I was like, this is what it's going to be. Whatever I see, whatever I feel, because I took that weekend off, I have to choose this and I need to go with this because I've done this long enough. And that was the final break point for me. But there was many, many, many moments that I was just like, this isn't right. I felt like I was hiding myself. When you know that you're having to hide yourself and cram everything down, that's when you know you are not in the right place. Like, people should embrace you for who you are, good, bad, ugly, everything, and see the beauty and just being human. Like, that's where it should be. But none of that was happening. So, yeah.
Wow. So, I think in listening to you, and I've had many conversations around, domestic violence and those sorts of things, and how scary it can be. Especially at that point where you make that decision to just leave. And so was that the case for you, or was it a little bit easier, or was it even more difficult?
Was terrifying, actually, because you weren't allowed to even have where I lived, I was not allowed to have an education. So I didn't have jobs. I was like, my whole life I'd put into this religion to my kids. I don't regret anything about putting anything into my kids. Like, my kids, 100%. I wish that I would have taught them differently. But that was my whole life. I tried to go to school and I had to quit because I was not being supportive to the religion and to my home.
Oh, interesting.
And so I knew that if I left, I wouldn't have a job. I didn't know how things were going to happen, like how my kids were going to be fed. And at the same time, I was like, hell, let's just do it all. I'm going to leave religion. I'm going to leave this marriage. And I got a phone text from my family saying that I was being disowned. So it was like, boom, 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 clean plate. And for some reason, it felt like it was even though it was extremely hard, it was such a huge relief. It was like, I can breathe. Like, everyone's expectations is off. Even though I know this is going to be so difficult, like, I felt happy. Even though I was like going through depression and I was getting into some dark places, I still was happy. And so I'm all about gratitude, about even though all the situations that I've been through, there's something to be grateful for. Even though I got raped as a little girl twice, there's something to even be grateful for that, because I built resilience. Like, that did not define who I was, who I am. And so there's power in that if you give it to yourself instead of giving it back to, that person or that moment. There's so much power if you can reverse your brain to say, oh, no, wait a second. That's not really, yes, that was bad, but that's not how we're going to play with this.
Right. So when you're thinking about those things, because it's brilliant that you say that, because there is something good about every experience that you have, like you're saying. And that's what I do a lot of teaching in my practice is you have to find the good in every situation, as awful as it is. Doesn't make the situation okay or right, but there has to be some sort of good. And so sometimes that's really hard for people to grasp. So how did you go about doing that, to say, I want to honor that even though it was shitty? Like, how do you like, it's not really a trickery, but it kind of could be for some people if there's a strategy.
Because it's your mind. I realized that I was living without a connection to my heart. Like, I did not want to feel anything, because if you feel it, if you even like it's like reliving it. You feel the emotion of that moment. And then your brain fires off because your brain is trying to protect you from everything, which in fact can keep you from living. Like
Yeah.
your brain can try and say, oh, don't do this and this and this. But then are you going to grow? Like, never.
Right.
Like, growth is painful, stretching yourself. So in those moments, and I still get them, I still have
Mm-hmm.
triggers come up and trauma come up, but it's different because I used to live in complete, absolute fear because I let my mind run it. I let
Mm-hmm.
my mind run the story. But when I became centered and self aware of like, okay, I'm just going to hear what my mind's saying, and then I'm going to question everything.
Mm.
And so, yes, this happened. Yes, that was scary. Yes, this happened. Oh, wait a second. But I'm not there right now. Right
Right.
now, I'm here. And so, what can I do to make that situation better? That person does not have a hold on me.
Right.
I am holding myself right now. So, what
Right.
do I need? If you can go below that emotion and find the root of what is feeding that and then dig out that root, I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
really, really brave to do because it's going to hurt. It's going to
Right.
be, it's not going to be fun. I had an experience that I had to do this with.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the movie It?
Yes.
So I'm not the type of person that watches horror films. Never,
Uh-huh.
ever. And my daughter-in-law, my daughter, yeah, my stepdaughter, she says it's her birthday around Halloween, and she really wants to watch the movie It. So I'm like, I could do this. Like 15-year-olds, bring it on. Like I can do this. And so we're sitting there watching it, and I'm like, holy shit. Because the girl in the movie with her dad,
Mm-hmm.
exact motions, voice, everything to a T. Now,
Mm.
your mind suppresses memories that you don't
Mm-hmm.
realize are there. But when you're in a
Right.
safe place, they come up so that way you can get rid of them.
Yep.
And so here I am watching this movie. I'm in a safe place now. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, my mind's screaming at me, holy shit, our story's so bad, we're in a horror film. Because literally
Mm.
I'm watching it in a horror film.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, but you know what? We're going to watch all of it. We're going to watch
Mm-hmm.
all of it because this is just a movie and
Right.
I'm not there anymore. And
Right.
you have to like come full circle of like being the woman who you want, who you needed in your life at that moment. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're doing. You're sitting with your inner self. You're sitting with that inner child that needed that and
Yeah.
coming full circle. So then after the movie, I wrote all the
Yeah.
things because you got to get it out.
Yep.
Then It Too came out. And I was like, bring it because they want to watch it. So
You're
then I
braver than
watched
I
It
am.
Too. Like, lean into fear. Let's do this. So I totally did. And then it came full circle again. Same thing happened as an adult. Same things. I just sat through the whole thing. And it was so weird, but I wrote about this. But I found healing in a horror movie
Mm-hmm.
because I pushed into fear. And it's kind of like being that kid that's scared with your eyes. Like, if you're like this all the time and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to look, I don't want to look, I'm scared.
Yep.
Your brain is going to create that emotion
Mm-hmm.
and that vision of what your fear is.
Right.
But if you open your eyes, even have a hand to hold, just sit there, open your eyes. It's not as bad because you realize, oh, that thing that tried to kill me, actually, I survived that. I'm a
Right.
badass. Like,
Yeah.
let's own that, you know?
Yeah.
That thing tried to kill me, but you know what? I'm still standing. And so you
Right.
start bringing in gratitude of saying, I'm grateful for this. You're retraining your brain to think in a different way because it only
Mm-hmm.
knows one way because that's the experiences. It goes off your experiences. If you've only had
Right.
bad experiences and trauma,
Right.
that's where it's living. So you got to give it a reason to think differently. So
Right.
yeah.
That's amazing. So here's like I have a few questions I'm writing down. I was like, oh my god, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh. So you're so like grounded and so like in a really good space right now. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
curious, was this natural for you to like everything that you've just said to me? It's like, yes, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And did someone guide you through this? Did you do self-guiding? Did you do a lot of like watching, you know, YouTubes and podcasts, or did you see a professional, or, how did that sort of come about for you?
I had tried many different therapists, and I had one therapist that really kind of spoke to me. Most of it was self-guided, a lot of reading, and I watch anything and everything about mindset, read everything, because there's just, in my mind, it's like, okay, we have this one life. I don't want to live it in my past. I want to live it in the present. But I had this therapist that told me, he goes, when you can watch it like a movie, then you know that you've been healed, that you're healing, that you can just sit back and go, oh, this is what happened. And, when you watch a movie, you're like, oh gosh, you feel for that person, you see, and you still have feelings, but you're not becoming that person, like feeling it. And I thought at the time, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to feel that, like, ever. I mean, it was ugly. It was totally ugly. I had my ups and downs, and one day I'd be fine. And the next day I'd be like, just in bed, curled up. I can't deal with this. I can't handle this. Now it's taken, oh my gosh, it's been like 4 years. So this has been a process of just creating a new mindset. But when he said that, I was like, okay, well, that will be great. Well, I realized when the first time that happened, I was like, oh my God, I'm healing. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And so that for me was even like that little glimmer of hope. And I think I have like this rebellious side too, because I fought against like the cult and everything else that was like happening to me. It's like, there's got to be a different way. So part of me is just like, you know what? I want something different. I want something more. Yeah. And I've always had this quote. I think it was Oprah Winfrey that said this. But if you don't have enough courage to ask for something, then don't expect the life that you're given, like the life that you want. Right. So I wanted this life I dreamed about as a little girl. And I knew if I was staying in that place, that it was going to be ugly. And so you always have a choice. Every time something comes up, you have a choice, whether to hear it out and then see where it's coming from and find growth in that. How can I make this better? Or to sit and wallow in it. But I just kept saying, okay, if I sit and wallow in this and get stuck here, what is that going to do me? What is that going to do? That's not going to do me any good. I'm just going to sink deeper and deeper and go right down that rabbit hole. And then that person at that moment has control over me, which the hell I want that.
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
That person does not get control of me anymore. I can say what happens. Right. So it was really just stubbornness, and it's horrible to feel pain. Like, no one wants to feel that all again. But if you can separate everything and say, this is the emotion that I had at that moment. This is what I'm feeling now. How do I want to feel? How do I want to be? And then find the goodness out of that. And honor. You have to sit with that moment and honor it and say, like, I had to go deep and realize that as my inner child was not being heard. There was a lot of self-parenting and just listening to her. Like, I would write letters to her. I'm so sorry. I never stood up for you. That letter still makes me tear up because it was so tender, because she needed to hear that. And you have to honor that to heal that place, to be able to move forward. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to throw it all together and here we go. You have to go through the pain to get to the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. You've kind of mentioned that a couple of times, like leaning into your pain and pushing into pain. And like, I'm so much in tune with the language that we use, not just in every day, but how we self-talk. And I'm interested because you've said you lean into pain and you push into pain. And to me, they mean something different. I don't know if they mean something different to you. Is it like more aggressive, or am I just making it up in my head?
Sometimes both, I think, because when you feel that much pain, it can feel like it's just taking over your body. And it feels like that you're actually the pain. like the expression of like whatever's happening. And sometimes if like a trigger comes up, I can feel the pain, but I know I can see the difference in my head. Oh,
Right.
this is either a limiting belief or a past experience and something my mind is terrified of, that it's going to happen again. And then I separate it. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is where my heart is. This is the life I'm at. I'm not in that place now. And it's just helping it. But when I lean into pain, there is a resilience. I feel like there's like there's like a wall. You're on this side and pain is right here. And it's like a huge freaking wall. And then on this side, there's all like the flowers and the roses and all the beautiful things. When that pain comes up, most of the time it feels like you hit that wall and you bounce back. And it's like, oh, I don't want to do that again. And it's like, oh, but we need to do that again. And so when I lean into anything that comes up, that was a lot of it for me to become where I'm at. And I still do it. I notice it and I say, okay, I need to push into this because this is like a sign for me that there's potential for growth. There's a sign in pain that's saying, oh, there's something here that hasn't been healed. Let's go deeper. Let's see where that's at. And so that's how I push into pain, is be curious, ask questions, and don't be afraid to feel. I think there's so much of today, especially we vent towards electronics or food or and which I've done, like all those things, instead of just saying, okay, shut everything off. Let's see where I'm at. Let's just feel. And that's a scary thing for humans to do. But there's so much growth when you do, because eventually that fear goes away, that pain goes away. But you have to like lean into it and say, okay, I'm here. And it's kind of like sitting next to someone you don't want to, but you're like rubbing shoulders with them. Like, I'm here. Tell me what you want. I'm listening. I don't like you, but I'm here. And so even just that, I think pain brings fear. And if you can lean into both of those things, it's amazing what's on the other side of that brick wall.
Yeah, it is. And, I think about my own journey and how, like, I go back to school and I did drug and alcohol therapy for years and years and years. And I was like, done, can't do it anymore. So let me just do something else. But I missed that helping piece. And so I was like, I'm just going to, get a certificate in coaching just to go along with my psychology stuff. And so it's like, there's this part of me like going through this. It's like, I'm trying to work through my own past stuff and come out on the other side, because I felt like I can't necessarily coach people if I don't have my shit together, which I now believe is false.
Totally false.
Because I'm totally not ever going to have my shit together. So there's times when I'm like, I feel sad or mad or angry or whatever it is. And I just like fake that I'm okay. And people in my life are like, it's okay to feel like shit. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be whatever. And I was like, I kind of needed that permission from people.
Yes.
And I think that goes for everyone, because a lot of people are like, I don't want to feel depressed. I don't want to feel angry. I don't want to feel sad. But then there's the times that they just get shoved down in, and then you don't have any feelings at all. Like you were saying, it's okay to feel, and you need to feel. So I appreciate you sharing that piece. And I think people are going to get a lot out of like just your approach and the way that you look at things. And so I wanted to ask you a question. I just interviewed somebody who's like an ultra marathoner, which makes me want to barf. But like, you're like, yes, I'm like, bleh.
I have not done an ultra. The furthest I've ran is 18 miles, but that's because I was hiking and I was like, yeah.
So he was talking about how, like for his whole life, because he went through some trauma when he was young and his parents divorced, and he just like shut it all down. And he had this moment, because he was a mountain biker on like almost I think he was a pro mountain biker for a while, and then he was an ultra runner. And he had this moment in his life where he was running or in the woods somewhere. It's in the podcast, you'll get to listen to it. But he's like, I was like, I have been running from my pain since I was 2. Like, it's time to stop. And he's like, I'm 38 years old or 39 years old. And he's like, I just realized that at this age, I've been running from my pain and it's time to lean in. And I was
Yeah.
like, I was trying not to like go, oh my God, don't cry. But I was
I
like,
know.
it's just so powerful to hear
Yeah.
that people really want the best life. And sometimes it does take leaning in, pushing in,
Hmm.
whatever, kicking its ass. Pain
Yeah.
is always going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And there's many moments that I was up in the mountains, like I was saying, like literally, because I have fibromyalgia. So I had very interesting moments with that because people would say,
Hmm.
well, how are you running with fibromyalgia? And I found that there is a threshold that
Oh
if
gosh, yeah.
I push, because I was so sick of the pain, and it felt like when I was going through this 3 months, like on my own, I was pushing because I did half marathons. Oh, what did they call it? Like I would be in the half marathon, helping other people train and
Hmm.
pacing them, pacing half marathons, like
Hmm.
doing other things, just running and running and running, just like the guy that you had interviewed.
Hmm.
Um, so it did feel like that I was like running and coping, like I was
Hmm.
hiding. I
Hmm.
felt really good. I looked really
Hmm.
good. And I'm like, oh, I felt like this is amazing, but I'm hiding a lot. Like,
Right.
so when I'd come up to those hills in the mountains during those 3 months, my legs would be screaming at me. My body would be screaming. And I decided, oh, I get to control you. You don't control me.
Hmm.
Like, I became like this. The hell you think you get to control me? This is my time. And so I would make
Hmm.
myself go up the hill. And I mean, it was like straight up. There was many of them. And I would go back to that one just to vent out my thoughts because most of the
Hmm.
time I would be screaming and I would swear at myself, get your ass
Hmm.
up that damn hill. Like, everything.
Hmm.
And it probably sounded horrible, but I needed like this explosion of
Right.
like this rebirth because of what everyone had taught me. And that was
Hmm.
it for me, is like you
Right.
have to feel and you have to do things that are completely, that look so ugly and so hard, but you have to trust in you. Like,
Right.
finally I get to trust me. And being vulnerable, like how you were saying about your story when you shared,
Hmm.
I love that because I think everybody feels at some time, I'm not good enough to do this. I got to have my shit
Right.
together. I got to have it all
Hmm.
together. But in reality, because I do that, but in reality, when you're so vulnerable, it gives space for other people to be vulnerable
Yeah.
and to trust in them and go, oh,
Yeah.
I'm human. I mean, that's really like all of us are just human with stories. And how beautiful would
Hmm.
it be just to share and
Hmm.
connect off of those stories? Um,
Right. And yeah, I
yeah.
think it's super healing. I think it can be, healing for you, healing for other people. And like you said, it opens the door for other people to share their story. And I
Hmm.
love what you said about like the mind is very powerful
Oh
and
yeah.
it will take you. It will take you places you don't want to go, and it will take you places that you weren't expecting. And so to be able
Yeah.
to, like, I think about like a workshop that I do, and it's about like the first part is about thinking. Well, what really is thinking? It's asking yourself questions. But if you ask yourself really stupid questions, you're going to get really stupid answers.
Yes.
And so it's just being really thoughtful about what you're asking yourself or what you're telling yourself, and you like this explosion of rebirth and asking all these questions in your mind and letting your heart answer as you're like
Hmm.
telling your body, F you, I'm going.
Yeah.
You can either follow me or you cannot, but we're
Yeah.
attached. So get
Yep.
up there.
And many times it felt like they were on like this huge chain and I'm dragging their ass up the hill.
Hmm.
But there was moments that the pain stopped.
Hmm.
So if I pushed hard enough, my brain finally just stopped.
Yeah.
And it just, and I found, oh my gosh, I need that peace. Like, I need that.
Hmm.
So I was like, after that, I'm like, I'm going to push every damn time to go to the
Yeah.
hill because I want that peace. It was
Yeah.
just, my fibromyalgia pain stopped. Like, but I believe that the fibromyalgia was honestly from the stress and the abuse
Uh-huh.
I was receiving because I haven't had anything from that since I went through all that and I left that.
Yeah. Isn't that
Um,
amazing how your body is so resilient once you treat it well in your mind? Like it's so resilient when you think about feeding your body. It will heal itself
yes.
emotionally and physically if you just take care of it
Mm-hmm.
and like be, yeah, it's brilliant. I could just ramble about
Oh, to
nothing.
go with your questions, I always have this saying of like, ask better questions. Like, if you don't want bad answers, don't ask stupid questions. If you're going to ask stupid questions, if you're going to ask questions that you already know the answer to, you're going to get that answer. But if you ask better questions, like, so I usually catch myself like, oh, that was a really stupid question, and that's why I got that answer.
Right.
I need to ask a better question. Okay, let's rephrase this.
Yep.
And
because
then you go.
I think, like your brain is brilliant. It it can mess with you, but it's also really brilliant. So if you do ask it those really good quality questions, it will find an answer. It may not be today or tomorrow or this year, but you'll be like, oh, I did ask myself that question like 6 months ago, and now I have an answer. It's really it's a great thing to have. So I love the mind heart connection that you describe, and really not letting your head sort of rule your every move. I think people get stuck in that and they don't understand that, but it really is some sort of electrical current that, gets created when we really think about that connection. So let me ask you one question, then I have some of these fun questions to ask you. But so when you are running and you are being physically active, what does that do for your physiology? Like, how does that, when you're having like a challenge, is that your go-to, is being physically active?
Yes. Because it's kind of like, I think that's part of my inner child saying, I want to fight back, because it never could. And so this is like giving me a chance to like fight back, but it also pushes out all my thoughts like very quickly. I noticed that the more that I push myself into something that's extremely hard or difficult, my mind will start throwing out immediately. As soon as I put on my shoes, I can't do this today. I have this and this and this happening, and I don't want to do this today, and it's too cold, and it's like all the things. And like, you just go into a routine, put on the shoes, you go outside. And then once I start running, then all of a sudden it's like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I literally started saying, you're not going to die. You're okay. Because your brain, that's what it's doing. It's trying to keep you from like situations and protect you. It's like, we can do this. I'm just going to that pole and we're going to hit that pole. And then I'll let you have a break. And then as soon as it knows, like soon as it's coming to that like 10-second break or whatever that I'm giving it, it already starts up. I can't do this. We can't do this. And eventually it just stops. Right. And then I can get down to the core of like, okay, what's bugging me today? Like, finally I got you out of the way. Like my little inner critic that's like, sometimes I feel like your inner critic, you have to, I don't really know if they actually really go away. I don't know if trauma really does go away. They're always going to be there. So it's, to me, it's getting into the car and telling that dude, okay, I get the driver's seat now. You get to be in the back. So I kind of give myself in the morning, like, okay, you get like 5 minutes to say all the things. The rest of the day, you don't get to tell me shit. I write them all down and then I burn them. I'm like, that's a great idea. I'm showing my mind that's where it goes. Or I go running and I vent it out. Right. Or I go on walks. Sometimes I can't do like the physical, the hard. And so I need to be soft and just hear my heart. Right. And it's just being present and having that connection of like, oh, that's what my brain's telling me. But really, if I combine the two and let them work together, this is really what's happening. And I just need to sit with that.
Right. It's interesting that you talk about trauma. I wrote an article recently, and it was about trauma, and it's not linear. Like, trauma is not linear. It never goes away. It may not be there for 25 years. And then all of a sudden something happens and it's triggered and it's there. And people don't realize that. And it really came about, like, I knew for myself and my story, that it wasn't linear, but I couldn't like really put a thought process to it until I went to, this conference about, victims, because I do a lot of emergency work. That's and awesome. It was like the whole thing was like, trauma is not linear, and it's not. And they did studies from like when they first started recording like mass casualties and shootings and those sorts of things, because they didn't record them for a while. It was like 68 or something like that. And it's like, if people that were around in 68 are still traumatized
Yeah.
by this event, whether they were there or watched it on TV or watched a documentary 25 years later. It's like,
Yeah.
it just creates this trauma for people. And if you don't know how to cope with that and you don't know how to use some strategies and skills, it will eat you alive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It will rule your whole life.
Hmm.
It will take
Hmm.
over.
Yeah.
And you gotta start putting boundaries for yourself. Like,
Hmm.
okay, this isn't healthy for me, but how
Right.
can I make this better? Because
Right.
it still comes up for me. Like,
Hmm.
it's just a
Oh yeah,
normal
me
thing. And I
too.
thought, why? Why? I've already been through that. And I haven't heard
Hmm.
anything for like, it's been shut off for like 3 years. And all of a sudden
Hmm.
it comes up. And I'm like, excuse me, what? Like, I didn't ask you to be here.
Right. Who are you and why the hell are you here? No,
But,
yeah, I get it. Yeah.
now I can be, okay, well, we're going to go through this and we're going to get
Yeah.
rid of it.
Yeah. So before I ask these couple more questions,
Yeah.
if someone were in a space where they were looking to like deal with trauma and deal with their past and deal with whatever it is that they are feeling stuck about, what would
Mhm.
your advice be for them? Like, first thing they should do?
Very first thing, give yourself grace. Like,
Hmm.
I did not give myself enough love and
Hmm.
appreciation for everything that I went through. And
Hmm.
I had to learn that the very first thing I had to do was be there for myself. Because something
Hmm.
about, especially because I had trauma as a child, that I had to go back and say, I hear you. Like, I
Hmm.
wasn't there for you. So
Hmm.
giving yourself space and love through that whole, just love yourself and accept
Hmm.
where you are.
Hmm.
And where you're at is not going to be a bad thing. Even though
Right.
you think, because I think there's so many times you wake up and you're like, oh, I can't wear that because, I'm too fat, or I can't do this because I can't do that, or I can't talk because that would be too much. Like, there's
Hmm.
always like these, where you're repressing yourself, where you can't
Right.
express who you are. You have to come to this full circle of
Hmm.
acceptance of where you are. And it's okay and it's safe to have the feelings that you do.
Right.
And then write. I wrote so much. And
Hmm.
because once you start seeing the story that's in your head, you realize, oh, that's not the story that's happening now.
Hmm.
Because moments of like trauma, you sometimes can't see the real story.
Right.
And to just see, oh, this is what my brain's telling me. And then rewire. So start with simple things of like talking back to yourself. I do it all the time. At first I thought I sound crazy. I probably look crazy because I had to tell myself, I'm safe, I'm okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this is all right to be this
Right.
way. And I'm
Hmm.
not here right now. Like, I'm not in that moment. And there's a lot, when you can talk to yourself, your brain hears your voice, sees the writing, and you are rewriting that story. So if you can see the story that you're writing, rewrite it and say, oh, but this is who I am now, and this is what I
Hmm.
want. You're
Yeah.
creating a new dialogue in your mind.
Yeah.
But it always has to start with love and grace for
Yeah.
yourself, because you've survived so much. You've
Right.
accomplished so much. And
Right.
if you don't give yourself credit for that, who else is going to do it better than you?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, yeah, badass. Be a badass and
Yes. Own that.
reframe the meaning of things that have happened for you the
Mm-hmm.
last however many years.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know you have these questions. You've seen them.
Yes.
Some of this was like so impromptu and just organic, but these are the ones that I love to ask everyone. And sometimes I surprise people and don't tell them I'm going to ask, but I did tell you. So, what is the difference between bravery and courage for you, if there is? There's no right or wrong answer
There
whatsoever. I
is a
just love your
difference for
thoughts.
me.
Okay.
Bravery is kind of what we were talking about, is seeing everything as they are and
Mm-hmm.
accepting where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Bravery for me is saying, okay, this is where I'm at, and I'm going to own that.
Mm-hmm.
Courage is following through with what you believe. So there was a lot of, with bravery, to say, you know what, I don't believe this way. You know what, I
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe anything that anyone's ever taught me. to ask
Right.
questions, being brave is going into the unknown of and finding who you are. Courage is living that every day
Yeah.
and saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to show up as fully as myself. That's, I think if everyone could do that, oh my gosh, could you imagine the energy that everyone would have? Like,
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. I get so many different answers, and they all seem to sort of be in alignment, which is interesting that, everyone that I have on the show is in alignment with me. I don't know what that's all about, but
we all got good vibes.
right, right. And then what do you fear the most and why?
So this question, I have like really gone through my head over and over and over because fear is different to me now.
Okay.
I used to live in a place of fear. Like I was fear. Like that emotion, I knew it living like that was intense. Now, because I've taken everything apart, I think my fear is limiting beliefs and past trauma and the things from the past that come up because I don't live in fear. So the fearful things that come up for me is don't stir the pot. No one's going to want to hear you. No, what you say is not enough, is not important, or don't go for that big thing. And I notice like all of the things that come around, I'm like, oh, that makes sense because I was raised in a community that women don't have a voice. We're not allowed to have, jobs. And so I see that I'm like, no. So fear for me is very much different from my past because I lived in fear. My body like felt like it just absorbed fear. Now it's like, yeah, that would be scary, but that's not going to happen. So I guess those fearful things would be like my limiting beliefs that come up of using my voice. And because I have this strong personality, and that doesn't always work for people, but those aren't my people.
Right. You have to find the right people.
So it's just pushing into that fear and being like, okay, this is good. This is good to speak up, And the more that you do it, the more the fear goes away. And so that was an interesting question for me because I knew fear, but this is like, oh, but I'm not living in fear.
Right. Yeah. So. It's a different approach, and it's one that's appreciated. And I just lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me as we keep talking. But so my practice is all about living in and from your whole heart. What does that mean to you? I know you do. What does that mean to you?
Living from my whole heart. I made a promise to myself, and it makes me teary-eyed every time. So sorry, I already feel the waterworks.
No, don't apologize at all, ever.
I made a promise to myself, like when I was going through those 3 months, I would never, ever, 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 ever give myself to someone else and let them decide who I was, what I did, what I thought. And I would show up 100% authentically me. And if that was crying, if that was angry, whatever that may be, I will show up as that. And that felt like I finally found that connection that I had lost from my mind to my heart. And that is living fully from my heart. It's honoring my heart and the emotions and everything that I am. It's beautiful. Like if we could all just say, this is where I'm coming from. This is who I am, and embracing all of that. That's living out of love. Like, how could you not live that way?
Right. Absolutely. And that's, my thing is it begins and ends with love. And like, that is how you get to that place of like, I don't know, like Maslow's hierarchy is like totally out of my realm, but it's like, you have this like reality that life is beautiful. And if you see it through your mind's eyes, it's clouded. And if you see it through your heart's eyes, it's bright and beautiful. Yeah. So I love
that. That leads through so much. Like if you have really hard times, there's been many times I'm like, wow, this could be a really difficult situation. It is, but I'm so happy. And I know that's because I'm leading with my heart.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep. I love that. And I know that you have a new job coming up, and I'm very excited for you because you have said it's your dream job. What makes it your
Yes.
dream job?
So I really try to come around and think, okay, what is it that I do? Because when I'm with people, I really bring connection. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I feel like I'm a total shit show because I'm showing like all of my past and all of my vulnerability, and but it brings connection. And then I realize I'm like, oh, you know what? I say the things that people can't say. I'm
Yeah.
like that voice for the voiceless. And
Mm-hmm.
so for I'm going to be a patient advocate at Children's, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm so
Mm.
excited about. I mean, fixing problems and bringing relationships together and hearing people and telling other people like this is what they're feeling, this is what they're experiencing, and making things better. Like, oh, that's like huge passion for me. And
Mm-hmm.
in my mind it's like this is just the beginning. Like
Mm-hmm.
I want something bigger. I know my heart is meant for something bigger, and I need
Mm-hmm.
to play there. And I never gave myself a chance to play there. I
Mm-hmm.
never just said, okay, we're going to stretch and go for this job, because this job, it said that you had to have, all the degrees. I
Right.
didn't have a degree. I have a PhD on life. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
got.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that I went for it, I asked
Mm-hmm.
for it, and I showed
Mm-hmm.
up just as myself. That's it. Like, I got the job. So it was like telling my brain, oh, okay, guess what? I get to do anything I want to do. And so I
Right.
don't know where my journey is going to go, but I'm so, so, so excited.
Yeah, I'm so happy for you. Congratulations on that, because I think
Thank
that,
you.
that shows that you can get out there and, for lack of better terms, take a risk and
Yes.
like be triumphant and successful. And that shows a lot of passion, and that shows a lot of courage and bravery for,
Yes.
anyone, especially, I don't want to make this about men and women, but for women who,
Oh, it
who
totally
have
is.
over history felt like they don't have a voice or can't go for what they want or whatever.
Yes.
So your example is going to go far. And I would encourage you to share that story with everyone. Share your story with everyone. Just shout it from the rooftops.
Shout it from the rooftops.
Yes. So I know that you have a really awesome social media presence. I love seeing your stories on Instagram. I love reading all your stuff. Can you share with people how, if they want to, follow you on social media, or if they want to connect with you, how they would go about doing that?
Sure. On Instagram, it's Jessie's Rome. And I picked that because Rome wasn't built in a day. So this is my Rome. This is my
Uh-huh.
this is my Rome. Jessie's Rome on Instagram, and then on
Hmm.
Facebook is Jessie Williams. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
Any parting words for our listeners today before I let you go? Because we could keep chatting probably all
Yes, we
afternoon.
we totally could. um, just have bravery to love yourself. Have
Mm-hmm.
bravery to be where you're at and find love in that.
Mm.
That's where it starts.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing your story and your time and space with me. This was more than I had ever even imagined it would be, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last.
Oh no, now
So
we need to meet up for coffee.
I know. So just so people know, like we are like literally like less than 100 miles from each other, which never happens on the Heartbeat. Like it's always like somebody in Australia or somewhere else. And
Yeah.
so we're so close and connected. So this is not the first time or last time. This is the first time, but not the last time that you all will get to hear from Jessie Williams. So I appreciate your time, and we'll do it again.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Yep.